So Will Wade is coming back. Is Nate Oats going away? It's March Madness on and off the court, SEC style. Chaos everywhere you look. Let's dive in next on Scarborough Knows. Explosions, flaming arrows, whatever's on fire. Welcome to SEC March Madness. I'm Kevin Skarbinski, a.k.a. Scarborough. This is Scarborough Knows. Thanks for joining me on this. Well, what day is it? It's Thursday, March 26th. You know what that means? It's the first day of the Sweet 16. But the chaos does not happen only on the court in the SEC. It happens off the court, and there is no more chaotic character in recent SEC history than one Will Wade. And I guess this will surprise no one that he is now back in the SEC at where else? LSU. We need a nickname for the three most notorious head coaches in the SEC in their sports. Will Wade now, the men's basketball coach at LSU, Lane Kiffin, the football coach at LSU, and Kim Mulkey, the women's basketball coach at LSU. What are we going to call these three? The Baton Rouge Rogues? That's not very good. We got to do better than that. We got to put some thought into that one. But that is the story of the day. Leave it to Will Wade to co-opt the first day of the NCAA Sweet 16 by returning to LSU. Returning, as some might say, to the scene of the crime. And you know what I'm talking about. You know what Will Wade did back when the NCAA had rules against paying players. That didn't stop Will Wade. Let's look at the welcome back sign. I had to bring back the first social media post that LSU put out when they hired Will Wade in the first place back in 2017. Look how young he looked there, full of promise, full of optimism, full of expectation that things would go well. But we had to add the welcome back. We had to put the word back in there because he is back for a second stint at LSU. And you'll notice some song lyrics on the screen on that graphic. Should I do my Johnny Cash impression? Does anyone want to hear me sing? You can run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Okay. Sorry, all apologies to the man in black. But that song, God'll Cut You Down, one of my favorites from Johnny Cash. This is who Will Wade is. When he took the job at McNeese State, after he got fired at LSU, after he was hit with a show cause by the NCAA, and McNeese State hired him, that was his walkout song at home games at McNeese State. Only Will Wade would embrace the villain role with that much gusto. And you got to know he's going to feel that way when he comes back to the SEC for a second stint. Let's look at some of the highlights and lowlights of his career. The man known as Mr. Strong Ass Offer. What did he do? Let's run down these bullet points. Hired by LSU in 2017. Of course, he was a very successful mid-major coach at a number of places. Then he was suspended by LSU in March of 2019 before the last game of the regular season as they were about to clinch the SEC regular season championship. Why? Because he was caught on an FBI wiretap. You guys remember that big deal, that FBI sting operation. They were going to clean up college basketball, and they mic'd up, wired all of these different people, and they caught all these people on tape. They caught shoe company executives, shoe company runners, assistant coaches, who provided nice buffers for head coaches who, of course, had no idea any of this stuff was going on, except for Will Wade, because he was caught on a wiretap discussing a, quote, strong-ass offer he had made for a recruit named Javonte Smart. Pretty good guard, played at LSU. I saw him playing the G League a couple of years ago here in Birmingham. So Will Wade gets suspended. He does not coach the last regular season game in 2019, the SEC tournament in 2019. They went one and done. And then the NCAA tournament, they actually got to the Sweet 16 that year without him. But he did come back. He coached a couple of more years, and then he was fired for cause by LSU in 2022. You know what fired for cause means? That means they don't have to pay you your full buyout. And then that was part of a full NCAA investigation, along with a number of schools that were caught up in that FBI sting. And as part of the penalties, Will Wade was hit with a 2-year show cause by the NCAA in 2023. And of course, that never stopped schools in the South, or really anywhere, but especially in the South, from hiring basketball coaches. Remember, Bruce Pearl at Auburn was still under a 3-year show cause. He was at the tail end of it. When Auburn hired him in 2014, he wasn't able to recruit for a while off campus because of that show cause. But that didn't stop Auburn. It turned out to be one of the smartest things they could have done, because he gave Auburn the greatest run in its basketball history. And, of course, that didn't stop McNeese State from hiring Will Wade. He actually was suspended for the first, 5 games, I think, of his tenure there. And as usual, he did a really good job. The man's a good coach. The man can win. The man's going to win. He's won everywhere he's been, and he will win again at LSU. So McNeese hires him. He spends 2 years there. He makes a splash in the NCAA tournament last year. They beat Clemson. They upset Clemson in one of those 12-5 classic upsets we see during March Madness. And then he takes the NC State job. And, of course, he can't just take the job. He can't just quietly arrive on the scene on Tobacco Road. Oh, no. That's not Will Wade. What does he do? He recreates an iconic pose struck by Jim Valvano, the man who took NC State to the 1983 national championship, on the lob, Derek Whittenberg would say, the missed shot, most people would say, that Lorenzo Charles dunked at the buzzer to beat Phi Slamma Jamma in one of the 2 greatest upsets in NCAA championship game history. The other, of course, was Villanova over Georgetown 2 years later in Lexington, Kentucky. So Will Wade goes to NC State. He coaches 1 year. And as soon as he has an opportunity to go back to LSU, he jumps all over it. And this all, of course, broke today, that he's leaving NC State. He's going back to LSU. I understand from my sources that he was frank, very frank with LSU folks, that he said, I'm not coming back to hang around with my effing friends. That he would only go back if LSU would guarantee at least minimum $12.5 million a year in NIL money. Now, I've only gotten that from one source, a very, very good source. I haven't confirmed it with others, but I feel confident in putting it out there that Will Wade was not going to go back unless LSU was serious about competing in basketball in the SEC. And they have fallen off under Matt McMahon, although I should say Matt McMahon deserved better. The season ended a while ago for LSU. They did not have a good year. They haven't had a good year in a few years. But Matt McMahon, they could have treated him better. But obviously they were holding out to make sure that Will Wade was going to come before they fired Matt McMahon. He'll get his buyout. So someone has a lot of money in Baton Rouge. Someone is spending a lot of money on LSU athletics with what they're paying Lane Kiffin and his staff, what they're guaranteeing there in NIL, what they're going to pay Will Wade and his staff. They brought back his AD from McNeese State, who is now going to be an associate athletic director at LSU. Essentially, he will be Will Wade's boss, his direct report. They worked very well together at McNeese. The former president at McNeese is now the president at LSU. And that somebody just might be the man who owns Raising Cane's, who I was told has more money than he knows what to do with, and he is very willing to spend it to give LSU athletics a chance to compete for national championships, which, of course, Kim Mulkey won a couple of years ago on the women's basketball side. Lane Kiffin has never won a championship at the power conference level, and yet people still believe in him. Don't you just know that at some point this intersection of chaos and confusion and ego and narcissism is going to come to a spectacular crash? It's only a matter of time. It's not if, but when and how. And I'm here for it because it'll be fun to watch along the way. But as I said, Will Wade is a very good basketball coach. Let's look at his record. When he was at LSU the first time, he was there for 5 years, and they won, as they do, as any team does when it's coached by Will Wade. Look at those numbers again. That's a 5-year period, 2017-18 to 2021-22. He overall had a very good record. You see the SEC mark. Now, we had to subtract some games because, as I said, he was suspended for the last 5 games of the 2019 season before he was reinstated. He was 1-5-51 overall, 55-33 in the SEC. He won 1 SEC regular season championship. He went to 3 NCAA tournaments. Well, he personally didn't because, again, he had to sit out the 2019 tournament under suspension by LSU, and that was the year they got to the Sweet 16. So a good but not great record. And let me throw this in there for LSU fans who are turning cartwheels, getting ready to throw a Mardi Gras type parade, complete with beignets and beads, because Mr. Strong Ass Offer is returning home. That was a very different SEC from 2017-18 to 2021-22 than what he's going to compete with today. We've already talked about this. We talked about it on this show. We talked about it on Rob Brown's Sideline Show in the mornings on the Sidelines.live network. That the SEC now, look, the last 2 years, they've sent 24 teams to the NCAA tournament, 14 last year, 10 this year. They won 23 games in the in the NCAA tournament. Let me get that right. I'm getting a little excited here. Sweet 16's tipping off in a little while. Last year, the SEC collectively won 23 NCAA tournament games. That's a new national record. This year, they've won 13 through 2 rounds, and they still have 4 teams alive. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. So this is an SEC with Nate Oats at the height of his powers at Alabama. For now, we're going to talk about that in a moment. With Rick Barnes at the top of his game, near the end of his career at Tennessee, they're still playing. John Calipari is re-energized. He's got Arkansas in the Sweet 16 for the 2nd straight year, and I can go on and on. This is a better SEC. So Will Wade better be a better coach than he was 5 years ago, 4 years ago when he left Baton Rouge. Otherwise, this investment that they're making in his salary, his staff salary, NIL, revenue sharing, etc., is not going to pay off the way they expected it to pay off, or the way they do expect it to pay off. Okay? And one of the things that I'm looking forward to most is renewing the rivalry between Will Wade and Nate Oats. They're both fiery personalities. They're both liable to go off on the sideline. They staged a memorable SEC tournament championship game back in 2021. Of course, Alabama won the regular season that year. They were 16-2. LSU finished what? Where's my Will Wade dossier? They finished 3rd in the league that year. And by the way, in Will Wade's 5 years in Baton Rouge, they finished 9th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and tied for 5th. So, as you can see, pretty good basketball coach. But in 2021, they finished 3rd. Alabama finished 1st. They met in the SEC tournament championship game. Alabama was led by Herb Jones and John Petty, etc. And LSU was led by Trendon Watford. And this added a little more drama to it because he, of course, played high school basketball here in the Birmingham area for Bucky McMillan at Mountain Brook. And he did not go to Alabama. He went to LSU. There was some tension there. And they staged an incredible championship game. There were some words exchanged between Oats and Wade, and Alabama won it 80-79. So that's something I'm looking forward to seeing those, because Alabama has owned LSU since, but they pretty much owned LSU when Nate Oats was going against Will Wade. So Will Wade's got a long way to go to catch up to Nate Oats, but it'll be fun watching him try to compete. That is, if Nate Oats is the coach at Alabama next year, and because this is not just March Madness on the court, it's March Madness off the court on the coaching carousel. Nate Oats' name again is appearing prominently as other jobs come open. And the most prestigious job that has come open so far is North Carolina. UNC fired favorite son Hubert Davis the other night after 5 years there. He just wasn't getting it done, certainly not at the level that North Carolina expects. Losing a 19-point lead to VCU and getting bounced in the first round of the NCAA tournament is not the expectation on Chapel Hill. So Hubert Davis is out, and North Carolina is looking for a coach. And immediately, because this happens every year now, because of what Oats has accomplished at Alabama, people start listing potential candidates. And if it's a program like North Carolina that you think can hire just about anyone it wants because of the tradition and history of the program, Michael Jordan played there, Dean Smith coached there, Roy Williams coached there, Tyler Hansbrough played there, and so on and so forth, Oats' name pops up because he's one of the elite coaches in college basketball, as we detailed the other day. So there are two sides to this equation, whether North Carolina would want Nate Oats and whether Nate Oats would want North Carolina. I should let you know that in a not dissimilar situation 2 years ago, another blue blood went through a coaching search. When John Calipari left Kentucky for Arkansas, Kentucky reached out to Nate Oats, or Nate Oats' camp, if you will, to gauge his interest. He was interested enough that I understand from a good source that he called the Godfather himself, Rick Pitino, to gauge his thoughts on the possibility of leaving Alabama for Kentucky. And from what I understand, Pitino shared with him that if you don't think you can win a national championship at Alabama, you should probably take the Kentucky job, because you know you can win a national championship at Kentucky. Many coaches have done that. Pitino did it. Tubby Smith did it in his first year. John Calipari did it back in 2012. Of course, Adolph Rupp did it. Joe B. Hall did it, et cetera, et cetera. So you can win a national title at Kentucky. It's been done multiple times by multiple coaches, although it's been a while. 2012, the last one. But as part of that conversation, Oats also told Pitino that he's happy in Tuscaloosa. He does like where he is. And so Oats told Kentucky, thanks, but no thanks. I don't think it ever got to the offer stage. Kentucky reached out to a number of candidates. Scott Drew from Baylor seemed like he was going to take the job at one point. Billy Donovan, there was a flirtation there. Didn't work out. Anyway, they ended up with Mark Pope. And all Nate Oats has done since Kentucky hired Mark Pope is go 4-0 against the Wildcats. So now we're in another similar situation, different conference, of course, and the ACC is, let's say, much more winnable than the SEC, given the fact that the ACC sent, 8 teams to the NCAA tournament, and 7 of them did not survive the first weekend. Only Duke made it through to the Sweet 16. So you might think, well, you want to win national championships, the ACC might be a better place to be than the SEC because the competition is not the same. Now, you still have to deal with Duke. And if you're at North Carolina, you have to deal with Duke about 8 miles away in that incredible rivalry. But I would say this, and I'm going to let you know what Nate Oats had to say about this today. But first, before we get to that, Nate Oats is happy in Tuscaloosa. I feel very confident in saying that. I also feel very confident in saying I'm not sure that North Carolina would truly want to hire Nate Oats because he might not fit their lofty ideal of what a head coach should be. Let me say this about the Tar Heels. They think they're better than you. And maybe in a lot of ways they are. Certainly they've had more success in basketball than just about anybody over time. But they have an arrogance about them. They are very, very secure in their standing in the sport. You might say, as I did in my column today on AL.com, you can't spell uncontrollably smug without UNC. So they have an image that they try to project, they try to uphold, and I'm not sure that a blue-collar grinder like Nate Oats would fit their blue blood image, their blue blood self-image. Now, of course, there's hypocrisy in their image. I don't recall the Buffalo program that Nate Oats led, his first college head coaching job, or the Alabama program being involved in an academic scandal that stretched back almost 2 decades because of paper courses that were favored by a lot of athletes, including some basketball players, on the 2005 and 2009 national championship teams from North Carolina, coached by the sainted Roy Williams. Now, we know how that turned out. The NCAA tried to come down on North Carolina because of alleged academic fraud because of those courses, but they really couldn't. And Greg Sankey, interestingly, was the head of the NCAA infractions committee at the time that heard the case. And they essentially had to let North Carolina off the hook because someone very shrewdly made sure that those courses were offered to the entire University of North Carolina student body, not just to athletes, although there were plenty of athletes in those courses and plenty of basketball players. So miss me, North Carolina fans, with your holier-than-thou attitude. But I'm telling you, because I've been told this by a number of people in the business, that they're not so sure that North Carolina would hire Nate Oats even if he wanted to take the job. And my sense right now is, even if that were the case, he doesn't necessarily want to leave Tuscaloosa for that job or any other. Now, today, Thursday, again, first day of the Sweet 16, the the Midwest Regional that Alabama's a part of, they don't play till Friday night, tomorrow night, as I speak. So today, they had the day before press conferences with the head coaches and certain players. And Nate Oats naturally was asked about his name being linked to the North Carolina job. Let's look at what he had to say. And I want to highlight a couple of phrases that he used in his press conference. This is a quote. These are direct quotes from Nate Oats. I love Alabama. My girls love Alabama. Greg Byrne is the best AD in the country. I'd love to work with him the rest of my career. I'd love to be the coach to bring their first national championship. To me, there's absolutely no reason to leave here. Now, let me go into a little more detail on a couple of those points. Nate Oats has 3 daughters. One is in college at Alabama. The other 2 are in high school. And most people who know Nate Oats will tell you that they don't believe that he would leave Tuscaloosa for another job as long as his younger daughters are still in high school. I think his younger daughter is either a freshman or a sophomore. So that's one reason for him to stay. His relationship with Greg Byrne, who has given him everything you could want, and Nate Oats expounded on that today as well, in terms of resources. It's not the biggest NIL war chest in the country, not the biggest in the SEC, but it has been enough for Alabama to recruit in the top 5, top 10 every year. And then go into the transfer portal and get guys to supplement the players that they bring in out of high school and retain and develop. And then the point, I'd like to be the first coach to bring them a national championship in men's basketball. I have heard from people close to Nate Oats that he has said this on multiple occasions privately. It's not just something he trotted out today at a press conference, that he truly believes that he has the resources that you need to get that done. The results speak to that as well. And we detailed this on Monday's show, and you can go back and check that out on the Sidelines.live network and on my YouTube channel, Kevin Skarbinski-Scarbo Knows. He's been to 5 Sweet 16s now in the last 6 years. He has won 13 NCAA tournament games in the last 6 years. That's an Alabama record. He's been to 4 straight Sweet 16s. That's the second longest streak in the country, tied with Tennessee, behind only Houston with 7. So when he gets into the NCAA tournament, which he does every year, he advances into the NCAA tournament. Only once, back in 2022, were they one and done. And one of their star players, Javon Quinterly, tore up his knee in that game against Notre Dame. But otherwise, they're getting to the second weekend at least. And on top of that, last year, they got to the Elite Eight, lost to Duke. The year before, they got to the Final Four. No Alabama team had ever done that before. They got there. They played UConn, which was going for its second straight national championship. And Alabama played the Huskies closer and tougher than anybody the entire tournament. It was a game into the second half until UConn just exerted its will and pulled away. Ended up being a double-digit victory, but it was not a double-digit game. So Nate Oats has proven that he can beat the best teams in the country, that he can advance deep into the NCAA tournament. And if you keep doing that, eventually, the theory goes, you're going to break through and you're going to win a national title. And I fully believe that Nate Oats is going to do that if he stays at Alabama. And right now, I fully believe that he's going to stay at Alabama. I don't believe he's going to North Carolina. The one school that would make me nervous if I were Alabama, if the job came open, would be Kansas. Now, Bill Self shot down rumors yesterday that he was about to retire. Everyone knows he's had health issues. He's had heart problems. He said after that crushing loss to St. John's in the second round, St. John's winning the game on a buzzer beater, driving layup by a guy who hadn't made a shot all day long, Dylan Darling. Bill Self talked about that. He talked about his health. He said he feels good. He said he wants to continue coaching as long as he feels good. But he was going to take some time, as he should, decompress and think about the future. And then someone put out there on Monday that he was about to retire. Self himself refuted that report and said that's not true. He has not arrived at that decision. So we'll see what happens there. But if the Kansas job came open and Kansas went after Nate Oats, that one would be hard to turn down because Kansas might be the best job in the country. In the Big 12, look at what Kansas has done. Look at how many Big 12 championships Bill Self has won. Look at how many big Monday games they have won. It's a ridiculous number, the record there, the streaks there. Now, having said that, Kansas is down by their standards. They haven't been to the Sweet 16 for 4 years. The longest stretch for them since the 80s. So maybe this would be a great time to take over the Kansas job because you have all of the assets and resources that Kansas provides. You have the history, the tradition, the home court advantage, one of the great historic arenas in the sport in Fog Allen Fieldhouse. And yet you're not following Bill Self coming off a national championship. They did win one in 2022, so hasn't been that long ago. But short of that job coming open, I think, and even if that job comes open, there's no guarantee that Nate Oats would be their first choice. They would be smart to have him on their short list, as anyone would. But I think Nate Oats is going to be back next year. I think he could stay at Alabama for a long time. They're working on a new contract. He talked about that today. And Nate Oats still has that, and this is something that I like about him, and more people should, he still has that high school coach's mentality. He pointed that out today, that he gets an annual $500,000 a year bump based on his last new contract, which Alabama redid a couple of years ago after they went to the Final Four. And he marveled at that. You could just, I wasn't in the room. I'm not there in Chicago, but watching his press conference and hearing him talk about, I get an extra $500K every year. You know how long it took him to make $500K at Romulus High School in Michigan, where he coached as the head coach at a high school for 11 years? A long time. So I think we can put to bed, not totally, because you never know in these situations, but I think Alabama fans should feel confident that Nate Oats will be there for a while longer. Should they be confident that they can beat Michigan tomorrow night? Actually, I think yes. Actually, I would say, interesting comments today, and I mentioned this sidebar, this backstory, this, the UAB ties at Michigan with Dusty May, the head coach there. He's been an assistant at UAB. Yaxel Lendeborg, the UAB star for 2 years, is now the Big Ten Player of the Year at Michigan this year. And Yaxel Lendeborg said something very interesting. He's made some news lately with his interviews. Remember a couple of weeks ago when he said Kentucky offered him $7 to $9 million to play for the Wildcats this year? And Mark Pope finally, at his final end-of-season radio show the other day, in which he unloaded on a number of subjects, he wouldn't answer that question last week during the tournament, but the other day, Pope said that's absolutely categorically not true. I'm not sure why Yaxel would say that if it weren't. We may never know the actual truth there. But Yaxel made a little more news today when he said, where's this quote? I want to get this right. I was hoping to get recruited by Alabama in the transfer portal after last year. When I didn't, it hurt me a little bit. All it is extra motivation. Now, that's not exactly true. As both Dusty May and Nate Oats pointed out today, Alabama did have some interest in Yaxel Lendeborg in the transfer portal. Alabama was not going to be able to pay what Yaxel Lendeborg was able to command from Michigan. Nate Oats and Dusty May actually had a conversation about that last year at this time, or when the transfer portal opened. And, of course, Michigan landed him. We don't know exactly what they paid. It was a pretty big figure. And Alabama doesn't have that kind of NIL war chest, as I said earlier. So I think Yaxel may be looking for a little extra motivation in this game, suggesting that Alabama didn't show interest in him in the transfer portal last year. That is not exactly true. So we'll see how that game turns out. But if guards matter in March, and they do, Alabama has the best backcourt of anybody left in the Sweet 16. And if they play on both ends of the floor the way they did against Texas Tech on Sunday night, Alabama will be in the game in the final 5 minutes against Michigan. And then all bets are off. And if LeBaron Filan, who had kind of an off game by his standards, plays to his level, all bets are off. If Latrell Wrightsell defends Elliot Cadeau the way he shut down Christian Anderson, all bets are off. Alabama can win that game. Don't be surprised if they do. And I'll give you one more from the SEC. I don't like Arkansas's chances to upset number 1 seed Arizona, or Texas's chances to beat number 2 seed Purdue. The other two SEC teams that are still alive, although I do want to see, I can't wait to see that Arkansas-Arizona game in the guard matchup. Darius Acuff Jr., Malik Thomas for Arkansas, the 2 freshmen, and then Jaden Bradley, the Alabama transfer, now a senior at Arizona, and Braden Burries, the freshman 2 guard at Arizona. That is going to be elite, those 4 guards going head-to-head. But I think Alabama has a chance to surprise people and beat Michigan. And I think Tennessee, which will also be playing in the United Center, along with Alabama, they'll be playing Iowa State in the other Sweet 16 game there Friday night. I like the Vols if Nate Ament is healthy and able to do what he can do at the offensive end, because he can go off for 30. He can get his shot off against anyone at any time. He can just rise up over you, shoot that mid-range jumper. He can go to the basket and dunk on your face. He can hit the 3. He's a 3-level scorer. How healthy is he going to be? But don't be surprised. We could actually have 2 SEC on SEC meetings in the Elite Eight. We could have, if these upsets happen, and they would be upsets according to the lines, according to the seeds, we could have Arkansas and Texas in the West Regional final. We could have Alabama and Tennessee in the Midwest Regional final. I don't like the odds of that happening, but can you count out the SEC in basketball anymore at any time? I don't think you can. And the SEC is trying to do something that it's only ever done once before in its history. Think about this. Of course, Alabama went to the Final Four in 2024. Last year, Florida and Auburn went to the Final Four, and Florida won the national championship. You know how many times the SEC has had teams in the Final Four in 3 consecutive seasons? Only once. Back in the period of time from 1993 to 1998, for 6 straight years, the SEC put at least one team into the Final Four. In 2 of those years, they put 2 teams. In 94, Arkansas and Florida both were there. Arkansas won the national title. Scotty Thurman hit that rainbow jumper that really was the dagger in the final minute to beat Duke. And then in 1996, Kentucky and Mississippi State both made it to the Final Four in the old Meadowlands. And Kentucky, with Mark Pope as a player, won the national title. So 6 years in a row in that stretch, the SEC put at least one team into the Final Four. They've done it back-to-back before on a couple of occasions. That's what they're sitting on now. And if one of these 4 teams, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, or Texas, can win 2 more games, this will be the 3rd straight year to see an SEC team in the Final Four, and that would be the 2nd best run in conference history. And then maybe next year, Auburn coming off an NIT Final Four. I chuckle. I shouldn't. Let's say this before we get out of here. Kudos to Auburn. Kudos to Stephen Pearl. And I am not being snarky. I am not being sarcastic. I am being honest. Kudos to the Auburn basketball program, A, for accepting the NIT invitation after being left out of the NCAA tournament when they felt fully they should have been in. They just had too many losses, is what it came down to at the end, despite all the positive metrics they had. But they have won 3 games now in the NIT. They didn't just go to the NIT. They didn't just accept the invitation. They didn't turn their nose up at it as North Carolina did a few years ago, as Indiana did this year, and others have done. They played. Their best inside player, Keyshawn Murphy, decided not to play. He opted out. But the rest of the guys came together, and they have won 3 games. They've gotten to the they've gotten to the semifinals. They won their quarterfinal game against Nevada last night in Neville Arena. They've gotten to 20 wins for the 5th straight year. That's the longest streak in the SEC, along with Tennessee and Kentucky and Texas A&M. Alabama's won 20 or more 4 straight years. In the 1 year they didn't. They won 19. But Auburn showed what you're supposed to show as a basketball team. You got a chance to play ball, you play ball. And when you get there, don't just show up, show out. And that's what they've done. And I'm going to personally apologize to Keyshawn Hall for a moment. I've been hard on him. The transfer, he's played at 4 different schools in 4 different years, big-time scorer, big-time free throw merchant, and I say that with love. But he has been indifferent on the defensive side of the ball. He has not always been a great teammate. He got suspended earlier in this season. Late in the season, as Auburn was struggling and going into a spiral that really kept them out of the NCAA tournament. But he has showed up for this NIT, and he has laid it out there. And so has Tahad Pettiford. And if you haven't seen the video of Tahad Pettiford's flying, death-defying block shot in last night's win over Nevada, go to my Twitter, at Kevin Skarbinski. I retweeted it, and I said, oh, my Hod. No regard for human life, including his own. It was a spectacular block shot. Someone his size is not supposed to be able to rise up and throw down a dunk attempt the way he did and block it with authority. So kudos to everyone at Auburn who's playing, who's laying it out there, and who has gotten to the NIT Final Four for the first time in school history. So maybe We'll have an SEC team in the NIT Final Four, which is in Indianapolis this year, same place as the NCAA Final Four. Maybe an SEC team will join them there. Don't ever count out SEC basketball anymore. And then maybe if Alabama or Tennessee or Arkansas or Texas can win 2 more games and get to the Final Four next weekend in Indianapolis, then maybe next year Will Wade and LSU can keep the streak going. You never know what might happen at LSU. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us for today on Scarbo Knows. I'm Kevin Skarbinski, a.k.a. Scarbo. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services. Whatever your financial services needs, they can take care of you. The Rice family, good friends of mine, they'll take excellent care of you. Check out their spot next. See ya.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.